Welcome to another episode of You Make It Happen. Today we're going to be discussing values and boundaries because I got questions about what are your values, how do you figure out your values, how do I know what my values are, and what the hell is a boundary anyway? And I get it. These are things that are not always intuitive and can be difficult. So let's get into it. Just real quick, before I get too far down the rabbit hole, please remember to rate and review the podcast. Rate it 5 stars on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't think it's worth that, then send me a message and let's chat about it. And it's always the biggest compliment to send it to a friend, a family member, anybody. Send it to your boss, your coworker. Send it to somebody that you think would appreciate it or just get some enjoyment or fulfillment out of listening to it, because that is the highest compliment when you share it with someone else. All right, so values and boundaries. We're going to start with values, and then I will delve down the boundary rabbit hole. So, what are your core values? And if you don't know, how do you figure that out? Well, it's not like I'm shy about referencing her name in the podcast at this point. I used the value list that I found at Brene Brown's website and discerned from there, like narrow down the list between 10 and 15 values that you hold dear or believe are important to you, central to your life, and then narrow that down even further. Take that list of 10 or 15 and chop it, cut it down to 5. I know that's hard. I know it seems impossible because all of these are really good values. Like there's a lot of values on there that will speak to you, and probably 10 or 15 is even a short list to make. And according to Brene's research, studies show that when we narrow it down to 2 core values, yes, you're going to narrow that list of 5 down to 2, having just 2 core values allows for more specificity in your focus and guiding your decisions and guiding your actions, and having too many can get a little confusing, and then you just, you kind of mishmash them together, and just having the 2 can make those 2 more effective. And for me, my 2 are integrity and vulnerability. And integrity for me encompasses a lot of other values. Like it encompasses responsibility. It encompasses accountability. It encompasses honesty. It encompasses respect. Like it's more of an umbrella. Like all of those values for me fall under integrity, because without integrity, I wouldn't have honesty, reliability, responsibility, all of that. Accountability. Like these are all things for me fall under my core value of integrity. And the same with my other core value, vulnerability. The things like love, family, joy, happiness, you can't have any of that in your life without vulnerability. Because I hate to sound like a broken record here, but I'm going to say her name again because Brene Brown illustrates in her research that vulnerability is the key to joy, happiness, love, family. Leaning into those things and being able to experience more joy, more love, more happiness. And who doesn't want that in their life, right? More joy, more love, more happiness. Oh, no, thanks. I'll pass and be miserable. Not a masochist. But leaning into those things is impossible without being vulnerable. You have to be open to getting hurt. You have to be vulnerable to experience joy and love and family and all of those amazing things in your life. I think my second core value was originally accountability or some variation of that. And after I learned more of Brene's work and watched the Netflix special over and over again, and it really started to sink in, it took me like 6 times watching that before it started to sink in, before I started to delve down the rabbit hole of Brene's work, her library of work, and all the amazing insight, valuable information, emotional language, lessons, and just general self-improvement and life improvement. It's not just that I started to improve myself. I improved my life and my disposition after becoming much more familiar with her work and practicing the lessons in her work, especially Rising Strong and Dare to Lead, like stepping in the arena and learning to live into my values and not just professing them. So that brings me to one of my biggest points about your personal values. Yes, it's super important to figure out what they are. And what's even more important is practicing your values, not just professing them. Living into your values, which is a lot harder. This is easier said than done. It's a lot easier to say, I value integrity. I value vulnerability. than to tell somebody I love you first, which is vulnerable, than to go to a friend and say, I need help, I'm in shame, which is vulnerable because you open yourself up for rejection. And if that's my value, then I need to lean into discomfort and practice what I preach. And I do my best with that as much as I possibly can. And this is just how I like to live my life. I say just, it's not just. This is how I like to live my life now, after years and years and years of hard work and trauma therapy and EMDR and yoga and self-exploration and meditation and just introspectiveness in general, looking in the mirror and saying, how am I contributing to this? How am I part of the problem of my mental health unrest or my unhappiness or this bad boss or this bad job or this bad employer? What did I contribute? Or what in me is subconsciously attracting people that are hurting me, people that are fearful avoidant, people that are anxious, people that are avoidant, when triggered. These are attachment styles. This is not who somebody is overall. I'm talking about their attachment style, which again is when triggered. What is it about me that's subconsciously attracting emotionally unavailable people to date, which historically I have? And I'm hoping that's changing because I'm like, maybe I just haven't been dating lately because of that. I've been off put by dating lately, and I'm thinking maybe that's why. But I digress. That's a little squirrel topic. But really taking the time to do the work and look in the mirror and say, do I want to say that I value integrity and vulnerability, or do I want to practice that I value integrity and vulnerability? And not just those things, but all the things that are encompassed and enveloped by those values. I'm going to get a little further into what is vulnerability and integrity, but specifically vulnerability in just a minute. For now, I want you to think about, what do I value? What do I deeply believe in? Is it faith? Is it financial security? Is it respect? Is it kindness? Is it honesty? The list goes on and on. And you can find a helpful resource list online. You can just Google Brene Brown values and it'll come up, or use any search engine for Brene Brown values, and a whole list of values to choose from will come up. And it's not like that is your only list. This is not a finite amount of choices. You can write your own. Choose whatever you value. If you value Mother Earth or nature, and that's not on the list, but that's one of your deepest core values, then absolutely. And it's covered by one of your core values, let's say. Like for me, integrity. I'll just reiterate briefly. It's covering honesty, it's covering accountability, it's covering responsibility, it's covering respect, because I don't believe you can have any of those things without integrity. That's my personal belief system, and you don't have to agree, and that's okay. But I do want to know, what do you value? And write to me and tell me if you want. I'm Missy the Traveler on Instagram, Missy.Traveler on TikTok, You Make It Happen podcast at Gmail, Missy the Traveler, all one word and in quotes on YouTube, because I don't pay for YouTube promotion, so you won't find me otherwise. Send me your questions. Send me your values. Send me why you value them. Tell me if this exercise was hard for you. Share and take a chance by being a little bit vulnerable. Tell me if oh no, I already knew my values, Missy. I don't know what you're talking about. I've done this work. I know what I'm doing. Okay, tell me all about it. Tell me how you got to your values. Tell me when you were able to discern your values. So circling back, what does vulnerability mean to me? And how did I land on that value? How did I change that from accountability? Or I don't even know what it was before, because I don't remember. It was years ago. I remember, picking the 2 core values and thinking, oh, this is a really good exercise and I like this and this is really healthy. And I picked integrity and something else. I want to say it was accountability. Don't hold me accountable for my actions. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, I make myself laugh sometimes. You guys gotta laugh at life sometimes, especially in solo episodes where I'm talking to the void. And that's why I love hearing your feedback. That's why I love getting an email. That's why I love getting DMs, because then I hear your feedback about, when I'm just talking to my backyard, essentially, is what I'm looking at when I look at the trees and the sunshine and the sun sparkling through the trees. Anyway, it's very pretty. So circling back, how did I get to vulnerability? And what is vulnerability? Vulnerability, it it really resonated with me in the Netflix special that Brene did, when our best measure of courage is how vulnerable you're willing to be. And I was like, what do you mean? I was taught that vulnerability is weakness, and that it's shameful, and that, shame is bad, and we don't talk about that, and any form of vulnerability really means weakness. That's what I was taught growing up. And that's one of the reasons I think that this became such a deeply rooted core value for me, is because I was taught this as a child, because my core wounds and core narrative from childhood include vulnerability as weakness, and therefore that's shameful. So our best measure of courage as human beings is how vulnerable are you willing to be? Because, as she reiterates in her special, there is no example of uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure without vulnerability, because that's what vulnerability is. It is uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. And you can't give a single example of courage that doesn't include uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. And if you can, then send it to me. I'm all ears. Send it to Brene. Send it to both of us. CC one of us, or send it to both of us. Because she's asked that question to millions and millions and millions of people and never gotten a response that made sense. Because you just can't do it. You can't give an example of courage that doesn't include uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure, which is vulnerability. Courage does not exist without vulnerability. And courage has always been something that I have valued from childhood on, because, as you all know, I did have a tumultuous childhood. I had an abusive childhood. I wasn't physically abused. I was emotionally and psychologically abused by what I thought was only my dad. I thought he was because he was overtly abusive. He would, name and shame and name call and throw epithets at me and hurl invectives. And he was just downright nasty and cruel sometimes. And it was the majority of my time with him. As soon as I could form an opinion and talk back, approximately age 13 or so, is where things started to go downhill, and we started to have a very strained relationship. Strained, not strange. Strained relationship, just in case I slurred that a little bit. What I didn't realize is that my mother, who was void of empathy, was actually worse, because her abuse was covert. And her undiagnosed borderline personality disorder, which I've talked about in many other episodes. If you haven't listened to them, go back. It's full of valuable insight and information. And there's even one specifically on BPD. That caused the covert abuse, the protection of the abuser. I can't tell you on how many occasions I went to her, especially as a teenager. And I knew that my hormones were going crazy, because I logically was relatively smart, even though I didn't have any emotional language or any emotional development as a child or as a teenager. I knew logically that my hormones were crazy, and that I was a teenager, and that I wasn't managing my emotions well. I just knew that. That's the extent of my emotional knowledge. So I went to my mother time and time again, and I said, please stop this abuse. Do something. Protect me. Help me. And I can't remember what words I used. Something along the lines of help me. Like, I need help. I am suffering. I'm suicidal. I am not doing well. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to live anymore. And maybe the suicidal ideation I expressed was passive. I don't remember if it was passive or direct, but I do remember this one suicide attempt from when I was a kid, and I'll tell you guys about that on another day. This was not as a teenager. I was a smaller child, and I did try to kill myself, and she rolled her eyes at me. Literally rolled her eyes at me after I told her I'd swallowed a bottle of pills as a 10-year-old child, 10 or 11. I can't remember exactly what age. Now she just denies that this happened. Anyway, that was a tangent, but I remember going to her for help and being told, you need to take his abuse better. You need to suck it up. You need to be the bigger person. You need to accept his abuse with more grace and just be better, rise above. He will never learn. He's always going to abuse you, and that's okay, because he's an adult and you're a child and you can do better. Talk about gaslighting, talk about abuse. I mean, that's flat out abuse, and not even all that subtle. At the time, I didn't see it or understand it, because, again, I was a teenager. But now I see it and go, whoa, you were worse. You were protecting somebody that was abusing your child, and you stood up for the abuser and you protected them. Not okay. Never okay. And as a child, we don't have a choice. As children, we don't have a choice. So if you find yourself struggling with this values exercise, ask yourself, what is in my past and what core narratives do I have that are impeding me, but not just with this exercise, but in life in general. And I know this was still a tangent, and I'm going to circle back. I promise I'm going to get there in a minute, but I want to finish this thought. What messages or narration in your head is playing over and over again or comes up when you think about something that you can't do or something that you're not good at or something you're struggling with, or I don't know what my values are? What are the messages that play? Is it, I'm not good enough? Is it, who do you think you are? Is it, I'm not enough? Is it, I'm not worthy? Is it, what's wrong with me? Because those are all rooted in shame. And chances are they came from your parent/caregiver dynamic from childhood. These core wounds from childhood need to be healed. And in order to do that, you likely, I'm not saying this is the only path, but one of the best paths is help from a licensed mental health professional, getting into therapy with a good fit therapist. I refer you back to episode 4 to discern what the right fit for a therapist is, and do your own research. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own research as well. And I'm not a licensed mental health professional. I can't reiterate that enough. I can't be clear with you guys enough that I am not your therapist. I'm nobody's therapist. I'm not a therapist, period. I am not licensed. This is just me as a layperson taking my knowledge, what's worked for me, all the work I've done, concepts from my therapist, concepts from Brene and Sabrina, and all kinds of other different hundreds of sources, books and TV shows and podcasts and reels and you name it. And the information that I've gleaned, I try to share with you all because this is what's worked for me and what's helped me. But find what works for you and find what helps you. So again, circling back, if this is a difficult exercise, if just thinking about your values or your core wounds or narratives are getting in the way, let's find some help, because it's likely going to be like this until you get help. We can't do this by ourselves. And maybe your help looks like a group support meetup or a group support online. Maybe it doesn't look like therapy. Maybe it looks like talking to your best friend. Maybe it looks like talking to your sister. Maybe your sister is your best friend. Maybe it looks like talking to your mom. Maybe your dad was the abuser and your mom stood by and took it or whatever. And your mom has done her work and now she knows better. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe your dynamic was you had a super abusive brother or stepbrother or sister because your parents didn't protect you from this person and this abuser, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, there's 100 million different combinations of dynamics, right? That we could all have because we're all different individuals and we all have value. We all have worth and we're all worthy of love. And if no one has told you that today, you are worthy of love and you have value. And I know I'm circling back. So let's figure out what our values are. Let's do a little exercise. I'm just going to give you guys some tips and some ideas and some things that helped me aside from just, watching that show and reading the list online. So what are your priorities? What matters to you in life? What do you stand for? What do you care about? Is it family? Is it faith? Do you care about love? Do you have a partner? Do you have anyone that cares about you? Are you passionate about animal welfare? Do you care what happens to animals? Are you a massive fan of Mother Earth and the trees? And then dig deeper. Ask yourself, why do I care about this? Why do I care about animals? Well, animals are innocent and they're defenseless and there's so many people that hurt them. And so I want to do my part to care about my animals. Okay, why? Go another layer deeper. Why do you care about that? Why do you care about protecting innocent animals and defenseless creatures? Because it makes you feel good, because the animals can't stick up for themselves. Like, let's dig a little deeper and get a little further down the rabbit hole of, if this is something you care about, why do you care about it? And then ask yourself, why the why? And I know that seems a little existential and we're starting to get a little further out there. And I can almost assure you this is a helpful exercise. And try to write it down physically, pen to paper, because it activates a different part of your brain. Try to write this down think about, maybe let it simmer. Why do you care about these things? So make a list of values or come up with your own list of values. You can use the reference point or not. And ask yourself why. Why do you prioritize this? Why does this matter to you? Why do you care about this? And what's important about this to you to be a part of who you are as a human being? And I'll let you guys in on a little secret. This value exercise, doing this, gives you more identity. It gives you more of a sense of self, of who am I and what do I stand for? And also what you want in life. You can also start going down the rabbit hole of discerning what you want in life based on what you value, what you care about, what you prioritize, what matters to you. That says who you are to the world, and more importantly, who you are to you. You are what matters most, and you get to decide what you value. And you can change your mind, of course, but finding those two core values, the things that matter most to you in life overall, really help form your sense of identity. And your purpose in life can be found through your values, if you choose to pursue that. And if that sounds like too much, whoa, this just became a way bigger assignment, Missy. Yo, I get it. That's a lot. We don't have to go that far down the rabbit hole. Let's just start with identifying your values. Like, what matters to you? What do you care about? What are you prioritizing in life? Let's just start figuring that out and maybe make the longer list, the 10 or 15, and then narrow that down to 5. And then when it seems appropriate, you don't have to do this all at once too. You can do this over a day or a week or hell, over, a month if you want. I mean, if you've lived your life this long and you haven't figured this out, take some time to truly be introspective and think about, why do I care about the things I care about? And what is it that I care about? Another benefit of figuring out your values is it can start to work on your core wounds and your core narrative. Because if you figure out what's a priority to you in life, what matters, that's how we begin to take care of ourselves, by living into our values and standing up for who we are and what we believe in. And when we self-abandon, when we chuck our values or change who we are to please somebody else, people pleasing, oh yeah, I was there. Don't think I wasn't. I was definitely there. And I still have my moments. We all have our moments. I still get triggered, and then I get anxious, and then I talk myself through it, and I go down shame spirals sometimes, and I reach out for help, and I do the things that I need to do to take care of me. But don't think it doesn't happen to me. It still happens. We all get triggered. We're human beings. You're always going to get triggered. It's about how you respond to those triggers, and the more time you have in between to think about how you want to respond, the more of a gap, the more space, the more time you can give your brain to get back into your ventral vagal nervous system state, your logical thinking state, the more you can decide how you want to respond to something instead of reacting to something. So figuring out your values and determining what matters to you in life is helpful, if not critical. I don't know about the data if it's critical to determine how you take care of yourself and how to begin to heal those core childhood wounds, which that is critical to self-care. So I know this has primarily been about values, and I do want to get into boundaries, but I'm starting to run out of time, and so I don't want to delve too far down this rabbit hole. I will get into boundaries just a little bit, communicating healthy boundaries and why that's important. So an example of a side effect of communicating a healthy boundary is being able to say no without feeling guilty or without feeling shameful, because you're prioritizing you and your mental health and your autonomy. Not automatically assuming other people's problems or emotions or feelings. That's also another side effect of communicating healthy boundaries, because their feelings, their reaction, their problems are not yours. And they're definitely not yours to own, but they're not even yours to deal with or feel responsible for. Definitely not yours to own. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are the emotional, physical, and mental health limits that we put in place for different aspects of our life, but I would say in this context, primarily for the preservation and benefit of our personal mental health. Like I gave an example in the other episode of with Maddie. I think it was the part 2 with Maddie, or maybe it was part 1 with Maddie. I think it was part 2 with Maddie, of a celebrity trying to say, I have a boundary. I don't like you posting bikini pictures online. That's not a boundary. That may be a deal breaker for you in your relationships, but it's not a boundary. A boundary would say, I will not date somebody who posts bikini pictures online. Also, massive insecurity sign, just saying. But that's a side. That's an aside that we're not going to get into right now. So that's the difference. You need to differentiate between something that you don't like, or something that is a deal breaker for you, or something that you can't deal with or don't want to deal with, whatever, versus a boundary. A boundary is something that you discern for your behavior and what you will and will not tolerate in any relationship, platonic or otherwise, or in life and work, any sort of relationship. There's all kinds of different relationships. There's work, there's platonic, there's romantic, there's intimate, there's all kinds of different relationships, right? So a boundary is, let's take an example of a boundary. An example of a boundary might be something that you do to protect yourself from overwhelming your mental health on a day off. So let's say you routinely need a day of rest, one day of your weekend, whatever your weekend day happens to fall on. And friends or a loved one or a romantic partner or your family or whomever has said, hey, I can only see you on Sunday. I'm not available on Sunday. Sundays I rest, and I've set aside this particular Sunday to rest. Not every Sunday, but usually on Sundays, I spend resting and rejuvenating and re-energizing for the week to come and doing my meal prep or doing my laundry or whatever. I spend Sundays doing X, Y, and Z, or you don't even have to explain it. Like that can just be in your head. You can just say, I'm not available on Sunday. Does another day work for you? And let's say this is somebody you love and care about. And that is a boundary. That's setting and holding the boundary. Holding the boundary, that's even harder than setting it. Let's face facts. Setting a boundary is relatively easy because you don't even have to tell anybody that you set a boundary. You can just say to yourself or in your journal, or just know, I don't make plans on Sunday. But then holding that boundary, that's what becomes harder. Saying to the person that asks you to do something on Sunday, especially, let's say it's somebody you're dating, somebody that's new and exciting and you want to spend time with them and you can't get enough of them. I'd refer you back to the Spark and the bonus episode, the regulation, and all of that, those several different bonus episodes, because that's not healthy to spend too much time together up front. Take it slow. Also refer you to Sabrina Zohar's podcast, Take It Slow in Dating. But anyway, so let's say that you really want to spend time with this person and you have decided for your mental health, it is better that you have a day of respite and rest on Sunday. And this person says, I can only see you on Sunday. I'm sorry, I'm not available the rest of the week. It won't be till next weekend or the next 2 weeks or whatever. Okay, I guess I'll see you in 2 weeks. That's holding the boundary. That's a lot harder. That's protecting your mental health and ensuring your autonomy, saying, I have my own life. I have my own priorities. You are in addition to my life, like Sabrina always says, in addition to, not instead of. Like, you are supposed to complement, not complete. That's me saying the compliment, not complete. Because whatever is for you will not pass you by. If this person is for you, or they're part of your family or whatever, they may not like your boundaries, but they should respect them. And I know I just shoulded, so let's watch out for that. But let's hope that this person loves and or respects you enough to respect your boundaries. Because if they truly care about you, they will respect the fact that you have set a line that you're saying you're not okay if they cross. And if they show up at your house on a Sunday when you've said, I'm not available, turn them away, don't answer the door, do whatever you need to do to protect your mental health and say, hey, this is not okay. I'm not okay with you being here. And then maybe you set a harder boundary in the future, or you say, hey, if you show up at my house uninvited, I'm not going to have a relationship with you, or whatever the situation may be. You have to decide the consequences of, somebody else's actions, and you have to decide for you how you want to protect your mental health. But make sure that you're prioritizing your mental health and yourself above anyone else's. And yes, I do mean anyone else's, your kids, your partner, anybody, because without prioritizing yourself, without loving yourself, without taking the time to protect your mental health, you're not going to be a good partner. You're not going to be a good mother or a good husband or a good father or a good friend or a good worker or coworker or boss or subordinate, you name it. In order to be the best version of you, you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. I hope you guys found this episode helpful on values, which I know I droned on a bit more than boundaries. And tell me what you want to hear about boundaries. If you want to hear more about boundaries, if you want me to give more examples, like sometimes I'll do social media videos and promotions, whatnot. I usually post on Instagram and TikTok more than anywhere else, sometimes on Facebook, but honestly, I neglect Facebook more than Instagram and TikTok. So follow me on YouTube, Missy the Traveler. Use quotes on YouTube to find me. All one word, Missy the Traveler. I'm Missy.Traveler on TikTok and Missy the Traveler on Instagram. You Make It Happen podcast at gmail.com. Send me your questions. Send me your comments. Send me your boundaries. Send me an example of how you've put this into practice, or send me your thoughts in general. And feel free to send me content ideas. If you want to talk about this on a certain episode, or you want me to find a guest that talks about that, or you want me to do a solo about this, send it to me. I'm open. I have lots of content and lots of material and endless stuff coming at you guys for quite a while. And I am very much open to feedback, suggestions, ideas, and I'm more than happy to try to cater as much as I can to audience requests for what you want to see or hear on the podcast. So don't forget to work your stuff out, not on other people. Follow me wherever you follow all the things, and feel free to slide into my DMs. I know that sounds really kind of raunchy, but feel free to slide into my DMs if you want direct advice or want to talk about coaching one-on-one, or if you just have questions for the podcast. I do actually answer quite a few of these, not everything because I get to as much as I can, but feel free to hit me up, and it's always worth a shot for the answer. And I do give free advice as often as possible. So as always, like I said just a second ago, work your stuff out, not on other people. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for listening.